Welcome back. Today's show is focused on a topic that hit me really hard when we started preparing it, overconsumption.
Yeah, we usually have a lot of fun on the show here, and some episodes are less serious than others. I've been extra goofy this week myself.
And we don't want to lose that.
Nope, and we won't because I can't help it. But as Yingying just said, it's hard to find a lot of laughs with this topic, so instead we'll kind of just talk about it and let it be what it'll be.
We think that's a good plan, and we hope you enjoy.
Let's start with a nice splash of ice-cold water on our faces to wake up to the reality of this situation. There used to be stories in the media with headlines all the time like this one from 2011, quote, "While Americans indulge in overconsumption, Chinese move up by enduring hardship," end quote. But those were kind of the good old days in a way, right, Yingying? I mean, does that make you nostalgic for a time when that was more true?
Yeah, it does. Things are changing in sometimes fascinating ways here in China, even beyond us Chinese people's understanding. The new headlines are things like this one, quote, "Credit card 88.1 billion overdue. Overconsumption is destroying the lives of young people," end quote. This is a more common type of news headline here from the past fall 2018.
We'll toss out some numbers for context here. The total amount of seriously overdue credit here, meaning 6 months or more in arrears, has actually now reached 88 billion yuan. In 2010, 8 years ago, this figure was only 7.5 billion yuan. Now, I was a liberal arts major, so I'm not that great with the maths, but I believe this is like an 11 times increase in 8 years. Is this freaking legit?
Sadly, it's true. Even more scary is a survey of the post-90s generation's debt data circulating on the internet recently. They are the 90后in Chinese. You know that term, right?
I do. For people not familiar with the local lingo, though, that's the Chinese way of referring to the generations. We briefly touched on this once before, but just in case you missed that episode, every 10 years is a generation here.
That's right.
Western concepts such as baby boomers, millennials, or Generation Z are too broad, they cover way too much time span, and they lack the same frames of reference that people would use in China. Post-90s also doesn't really mean they grew up after the 90s were over, like it kind of sounds in English. It means that they're born and grew up starting sometime in the 90s, so they're between 18 to 28 years old right now. But how are they doing debt-wise?
The official reporting shows that the average debt has reached 18.5 times their monthly income.
What? That's nuts. Can you put a little meat on those bones? I mean, what's that mean to the average post-90s person?
Well, it means that if average salary is 6,917 yuan, which it is, then average debt can be as high as 127,900 yuan.
That is totally crazy. I mean, I thought Chinese people were historically good savers. Is this like maybe skipping a generation here?
Apparently so. According to the 2018 China Pension Prospect Survey report, the average monthly savings for young people aged 18 to 34 is only 1,339 yuan.
Okay, again, not a math major here, but I do have an iPhone, speaking of overconsumption, and my converter APP tells me that that's the equivalent of $195 in savings. So in that way, you guys really are catching up with the West.
And not always in the way we might want.
True that. In the spirit of fairness, we should point out that although you and I happen to know a lot of high achievers and wealthy type of folks because of our jobs, that doesn't really change the fact that most folks in the U.S., as in a statistical majority by most every measure, are really struggling. We've just been dealing with managing crazy levels of personal debt for so long that we kind of take it for granted now. But if financial troubles are new territory for someone, it can be super terrifying to get your head around finding a way out.
Many writers are suggesting that poverty will be the most permanent characteristic of this generation of young people. The worst part of being poor, though, is not even the lack of money. It's the loss of hope that can come with it.
Yingying, when was your first job?
18 years old.
Cool.
I worked in a restaurant in a hotel before going off to college.
Mm-hmm.
My mom thought it was important for me to know the value of earning my own money and that it would be a great practical experience for me before going to school for 10 years.
Smart lady. You know, I've been working since I was 14 years old, actually, and I've been self-employed most of my adult life. So honestly, I know that feeling pretty well. Not to be overly dramatic here, but if things are really bad, it can feel like you're staring into the proverbial abyss. And for local people who grew up with and are now surrounded by this narrative of, boundless growth and endless optimism that gets sold ever more aggressively and pervasively here, it's going to be an uphill battle to turn this ship around.
You're right, but for the merchants, the abyss is not their main concern. For the sake of profit, they often use whatever means, even at expense of disrupting the values of society and ruining an entire generation. This concept of consumerism has run rampant and affected the whole society.
One really insidious part of the messaging these days aimed at the youth market is that they're told they're reluctant to overspend on nice things not because they can't afford it, but because subconsciously they think they're not worth it.
In advertising, there are also a lot of appeals to men that imply that they are not real men if they don't indulge in supporting all of this. And to the girls and women, this idea is so that feminism is only possible through the consumption of the expensive beauty products.
And that's something I've grown up with back home my whole life, so I know how that story plays out. There's also this kind of inexplicable phrase you told me that's said here, in Chinese of course, that basically goes like this, something like, no girl will become poor because of buying and buying, especially beautiful girls. What a crock!
What's a crock?
It's a jelly-like slip-on shoe designed for comfort and intended to ensure that no one takes you too seriously, kind of like this man bun I'm rocking here.
I'll copy that. Anyway, there are always ways to appeal to those whose vanity is less visual and more intellectual. Another message I've heard a lot is that a smart woman is willing to spend money on herself. Well, that's often accompanied with suggestion that if you don't just buy and buy and buy, your IQ is low, implying that if you are smart enough, and you will figure out a way to buy the things you want.
There really are countless examples of how marketers encourage people to consume without thinking. They link consumption with identity, class, taste, intelligence, love, and even a strong family life. We could go on and on about that, but let's shift gears and look at some data now. It may not be too much more fun than what we just talked about, but at least it does give us a frame of reference to work with and build on. What were those debt numbers you told me offline?
According to the 2017 Youth Consumption Life Report, there are nearly 170 million post-19 generation, and the number of them who are in serious debt exceeded 45 million. For many people, this starts with small consumer loans. One young man said that at first he just wanted to buy an iPhone. He couldn't afford to buy it outright, so he got his first credit card. That was fine for a while, but soon enough, he got another card, then several online credit accounts. And before he knew it, his monthly payments were equal to his total monthly salary.
Damn!
And he couldn't even afford food and rent anymore.
And as those post-90s people grow up, it's not a much more rosy picture. The official release data shows that those with the most so-called unhealthy shopping habits are often aged between 35 and 45. Now, this is quantified as those who can't go more than a week without buying something they can't afford based on what they earn, and who spend between 1 to 3 hours shopping online a day. Wow.
Yes, there seems to be no end in sight. Overconsumption is a serious problem, and the root of it is a lack of rationality. The only way out is to encourage a new focus on critical thinking, deep thinking, and independent thinking. People cannot let themselves be so easily influenced by the values of marketers, and don't blindly follow anyone.
Preach it, Ying-Ying.
I was super worked up as we prepared this one.
I totally could tell. I'm glad you calmed down now.
We cut a lot of other data and examples that would just depress people. But hopefully we made the point.
I think we did, but the audience will let us know, right?
Yeah. And now let's get into some more encouraging things.
Yes, please.
There are many international examples of youth-driven companies like Fashionista, a new star we saw at an event here recently.
Right.
They combine making fashion more affordable to the target customer while also incentivizing them to recycle their high-quality used clothing for those in need. It's designed to promote more rational shopping and to think before you buy. It's in its early stages, but looks cool.
It does. And there are tons of other entrepreneurs out there who are developing products that help to solve financial problems, but means such as driving a focus on responsible pricing, greener production or consumption, things like that.
In the spirit of all that, we have an offer for the people listening to this.
Yeah, we do.
If you have any socially focused entrepreneurial ideas that you want to share with us or have us discuss with some of our wider network on our future episodes, or maybe you even want to join us on the show sometime yourself as a guest, let us know.
Please do that. Our website's going to be a work in progress pretty much forever, but there are contact forms all over it to reach out. You can go to the feedback page as a good start, though. And soon we'll be adding a community page also at HowChinaWorksPodcast.com. That's going to give us a place to highlight, promote, and connect people, brands, and startups we think can maybe help with some of this and more.
Sounds awesome. Thanks, Brendan.
I've got to say, I'm glad to be wrapping up this episode. It's not the most uplifting one we've done, but we do think it was candid, relevant, and necessary to put it out there as a reference point for us to come back to later.
Oh, great. Our approach on this show, as we have said in many different ways, is to increase empathy. And to do that, it's important to look at the harder things as well as the fun and easier ones to talk about.
And this episode is an example of how we're constantly adjusting our plans for the show as we go along. It's not actually the one we originally intended to make way back when we mapped things out, but given all the givens plus what we talked about so far this week, it felt essential and it just made sense.
We hope to always learn and grow and expand our ideas, and getting all the feedback from our growing community of listeners is really helping us do that. So thank you.
We're heading to the end of week 5 already. Can you believe it?
Well, sometimes it feels like we just got started, and other time it's like we have done this forever.
Yes, it does.
But as long as it's fun and useful for people, it's all good.
Agreed. Speaking of being useful, tomorrow we'll look at investing in China and how to think of the markets here, among other things.
And we'll give you some resources to get even more in-depth information about the topic of money and investing in China. Then conclude the whole week of shows to see what we've learned ourselves. Until then, I'm YINGYING.
And I'm Brendan Davis. See you tomorrow on How China Works.